someone that I listen to every week. I try to read almost everything he publishes, is Victor Davis Hanson, a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. Victor, great to see you. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
So, Victor, you have had some phenomenal commentary lately on President Trump's tariff policy and how we should think about this through national security and the reindustrialization of America terms. Please explain to our audience what your take is on President Trump's tariff announcement.
Well, it's very incumbent upon him and his team to talk in terms of symmetry and parity, and to emphasize that his wish would be a tariff-free world. But unfortunately, that's been only half true, that the United States is the only country in the world with such low tariffs and has essentially a free market. And that was fine during the post-war era when we were rebuilding Europe and deterring the communist world. But 80 years later, the United States is facing $37 trillion in debt, $3 billion in interest per year, a $1.7 trillion budget deficit, and almost over, most years, over $1 trillion in trade deficit. So what we're asking for is not asymmetry, but just parity. And that would mean I don't even think Donald Trump and his team have said we need parity right now. Just to take one example, they would say to Mexico, you were part of a free trade North American continent. What happened? You're running 50 and then 80 and then 100, then 150. And now you're running $177 billion annual trade deficit. You're a conduit for the communist Chinese to get around tariff policies, which are asymmetrical in their favor. And this is in addition to you have $63 billion coming to your country in remittances, most of whom are people here, or from whom people are here illegally, and they're subsidized by our own welfare system. And then there's some $20 to $30 billion in excess that's estimated to come from smuggling and the cartel's fentanyl trade, which is killed. That's not the behavior of a good neighbor, and we're just asking for parity. And I think he could apply that logic and tone, vocabulary, diction to all of these, Europe, China, maybe not China because we expect it from them, but Europe, Canada, Mexico, and not let them get away with the idea that we're waging a unilateral trade war when we're just asking for parity and reciprocity.
So help me understand the history of tariffs. The only history that most people can remember is, oh, tariffs caused the Great Depression, Smoot-Hawley tariff. But it's actually far more deep and complex and interesting than that. Our government was largely funded on tariffs, as per Abraham Lincoln supported and Alexander Hamilton. What is the history of tariffs when it comes to our country? And let's go much deeper than the superficial analysis that, oh, it caused the Great Depression.
Well, to put it another way, we didn't have an income tax. It was envisioned in 1913, but ratified in 1916. So then that begs the question, where did the federal government get their money? They had no other source of revenue other than tariffs, essentially. And that was, it wasn't just the idea of protecting domestic industries, but it was also a revenue generating mechanism for the federal government. And one of the reasons, to be frank, why people did not want an income tax is because they felt that government by needs would be small and manageable. The federal government would be if it relied on tariff income rather than everybody paying, a percentage of their wages. That was never envisioned by the founders. But tariffs were pretty much part and parcel of the American project until about 1916. And then all of a sudden, we substituted them with this vast new influx of the IRS and income tax revenue. And then people said, well, they're kind of obsolete now. But they were designed both to fund the federal government, but fund a small federal government, and also to protect vulnerable industries. But remember what the opposition is saying, Charlie, the free but not fair opposition. They're saying, well, we believe that free trade must be maintained at all costs, without exception. And when you say it hurts Americans, Americans lose jobs in American industries or offshored or outsourced. They say, no, it doesn't matter because the subsidies of our foreign governments are not sustainable if they're dumping product here below the cost of production. And we found that not to be true. China's been fine doing it for almost a half century. Then they said, well, it lowers consumer prices because you're bringing in cheap stuff that domestic people have to adjust to. That may or may not be true, but if the other side is being subsidized and your own producers are not being subsidized, then it's a way to put people into bankruptcy. And I can attest for that as somebody who farmed during the Reagan period when EU agricultural produce was subsidized and dumped in this country, and we were told that that was good for us because it would make us more efficient. And that's the third fallacy. They say, well, if you allow foreign stuff to come in without a tariff, even though it's being produced at below the cost of production, then you're going to have to compete with it, and that'll make you lean and mean. But there's only a certain point where you can compete when you're losing money. So it's a deliberate policy that, and I'm speaking as a conservative, but a lot of the libertarians believe that even the most abusive tariff, asymmetrical tariffs are in the interest of the target almost, as if, get with it or get over it. And it's destroyed the interior of the United States.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.